Welcome to tutorial 2, where we talk about how to use transitions. Okay, so I'm going to reset all of these. I'm going to remove attributes, click OK, so that there is no effects installed on these clips. They are just raw clips. They've been edited, they're in the timeline, they're ready for some effects. Okay, so I'm going to start down here with directional blur in normal. So the in and the out refers to which side of the clip we put the transition on. And it's a little bit counterintuitive. When I put on in actually means that the blur, this new transition, this thing that I just added, directional blur, is on the right-hand side. It's not on what you would think is the endpoint. You think in, out, but it's actually the opposite. It's flipped. This will make a little bit of sense if you've done any keyframe works and you know about easing in and easing out. Sort of like that. So now let's say that I want to add a directional blur onto this little salamander guy. So I'm going to come down to the same effect, directional blur. This time it's out, normal. Drop it right there. Now you can see that these blur together really nicely. I'm just going to play that back. Very nice. I like that. And let's just do, for the heck of it, let's do directional blur out fast. You can see that they're just different speeds. Directional blur out fast. Out goes on the left-hand side. Got that there. And I'll go directional blur in. That goes on the right-hand side. You can see that I have an out on the left-hand side, and I have an in on the right-hand side. See what that looks like. Okay, so that blur is just a little bit faster. Let's say that you wanted to customize these. Let's say that the 4 speeds, or the 4 different speeds that you have, you may want to change, customize for yourself. So you can do that by clicking on a clip, and if you're here, just click on Effect Controls. You have to click on the clip again. There we go. We have the effect controls for this clip, T12 effect controls. And you may notice something a little bit different than what's normally in effect controls. Normally we have motion, opacity, and time remapping. But when we add on this directional blur in normal, we added a new effect. We added a new effect that has some keyframes on it. So I won't get into keyframes here because it is a bit of a deep dive. But if you're interested and you want to learn a little bit more about animation, you can check out my Premiere Pro course on the 4Editors website. But anyway, if you know what you're doing, basically, I'm going to drag these keyframes apart. And by doing that, I've made this blur a little bit slower. I've made it like a custom effect, basically. I've just taken what's already there, this preset that was created by the 4Editors. And now I've slowed the whole thing down. On this side, the blur is still a little bit fast. So what I need to do is click on this clip. Now I'm looking at T30's effect controls. T30 is the name of this clip right here. I'm going to come down and say, oh, okay, great. Directional blur out. That's this left-hand effect. I'm going to drag these keyframes apart. Now this whole blur is just going to be a lot slower. There we go. Pretty cool. So, I think I would probably actually stick with the presets on that because, they made those for a reason. But you get the idea. A lot of these different presets that you'll have downloaded have a lot of different effects. They may not just have one effect. There may be a series of effects that accomplishes that whole transition. And all of those effects are going to have their own keyframes. If you want to customize them, that's how you do it. Come up to effect controls. You can play with these keyframes to your liking. All right, great. So by the time you get done installing all of these presets, there are going to be a lot of transitions in here. So you may be asking, can I organize these? And the answer is yes and no. Yes, we can create folders inside of the presets folder. We go right-click, new presets bin. Okay, where did that go? I don't know. I'm going to have to look for it. There it is, presets bin 3. And I could rename this. Let's see, I wanted to do all the directional blurs. Going to name this directional blur. Okay, so I've got a new folder that I can drop things into. But the only problem is, if I can't see both the folder and the transition at the same time, which in this case I just can't. It is mildly infuriating that I cannot drag this down. I just can't go down any further. I can try scrolling, I can try pulling it down. Normally inside of a file organizer or file explorer, something like that, we'd be able to move down, but for some reason Premiere Pro has not added that functionality, which is a bit frustrating. What we can do is make the size of this effects panel bigger. So I'm going to click on the tilde key. The tilde key is right underneath your escape key on your keyboard, or just to the left of the one. It's a little squiggle mark. I'm going to hit that, make sure that I have the effects panel selected, and that is going to maximize the size of this panel. You can actually do this for any panel in Premiere. So let's say I wanted to maximize my program. Hit the tilde key and hit it again to minimize it. So come to Effects, Maximize. Now I can see all of these bins and the effects at the same time. Okay, so directional blurs. Here we go. If I try to do the shift-click method, where you click first one and then shift-click the bottom one, doesn't work. Again, functionality that's lacking here. But what you can do is hold down Control and select all of them. A little bit more tedious than it needs to be. But now I can drag and drop these into the directional blurs folder. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to say this. You may get to a point where you have so many different folders in here and you have still effects that you need to sort up at the top that it takes up your whole screen and there's just no way to drag them down into the folders. I know that would be very frustrating, so I'm just going to put that out there right now. If there are so many effects in here, you may not be able to sort all of them, so you may have to get creative about how you decide to prioritize which ones you're going to organize into folders. You don't have to organize all. I'll say that too. You could just leave them all in the presets. There's just going to be a very long list of presets. Again, you could try to make a favorites, but the problem is if you have a favorite up at the top, you can't drag it all the way down to this list of folders to drop it in there. So it's a little bit tricky. If anybody wants to write to Premiere and say, hey, add this feature, be my guest. You know what? I think I might just do that between the end of this video, which is right now, and the next video coming up where we install some LUTs.